4. All good.
Good evening. Welcome to the Construction Industry Coronavirus Forum Hustings. The Scottish Parliament elections will take place on Thursday the 6th of May. And this evening, Scottish construction industry professionals will have the opportunity to hear the views, ideas and policy plans of 5 politicians, each representing one of the 5 main parties contesting the election. As well as our 5 pre-prepared topics, you can submit your own questions via the Q&A function, and our panellists will answer them if time allows. I'm Drew Johnston, who, along with my business partner Michael Crawford, run Blueprint Media, a Glasgow and London-based PR firm which acts as PR advisors to CCIV forum members Select and SNPF. We've also been responsible for securing substantial media coverage for the forum since its inception. The CCIV forum was formed in early March 2020 in response to the urgent COVID-19 threat to people and business. With a focus firmly on collaboration, the forum brings together senior representatives from 29 construction, trade and professional associations across Scotland. Forum actions include lobbying the Scottish Government to influence policy and push for positive action, and providing expert advice on important sector issues including commercial, employment, planning, skills and health and safety. The forum is chaired by Select, Scotland's trade association for electrical contractors. So, house rules. I will introduce each of the panellists, after which each of them will have 2 minutes to make their opening statements. I will then ask all our panellists a series of questions, 5 in all, which have been prepared by senior members of the CCIV forum. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer each question, so we ask that these are as succinct as possible to allow all 5 panellists to make their contribution. After that, we will have as many questions as we have time for from members of the audience. Throughout our proceedings, our other panellists will be muted when a candidate is speaking. Our running time this evening for this evening's hustings is 60 minutes, so we will be concluding at 7 o'clock. So in alphabetical order, let me introduce our panellists. Carol Ford is the Scottish Liberal Democrat constituency candidate for Glasgow Southside and lead list candidate for Greater Glasgow region. As a former head teacher of Kilmarnock Academy, she currently works as an associate tutor at the University of Strathclyde and is involved in professional regulation at the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Scotland. Monica Lennon, of Scottish Labour, is the Deputy Convener of the Scottish Parliament's COVID-19 Committee and is the Labour Party's spokesperson on economy and fair work. Before politics, she worked for over a decade in house building, construction and the public sector as a chartered town planner. She is a member of the Royal Town Planning Institute. Laura Moody, representing the Scottish Greens, is top of list candidate for South Scotland region. Laura previously worked in technical publishing and broadcasting and is currently the coordinator of a local community benefit project, as well as being the trustee of several charities. Alexander Stewart, from the Scottish Conservative and Unionists, is the candidate for Clackmannanshire and Dunblane within the Mid-Scotland and Fife region. From 2016 to 2021, he was Shadow Minister for Local Government, Housing and Planning, and is also the past Shadow Minister for Local Government and Shadow Minister for International Development and External Affairs. Kevin Stewart, for the SNP, was first elected to the Scottish Parliament in 2011. Kevin has served as Scottish Government Minister for Local Government, Housing and Planning since 2016. Kevin led the Scottish Government's £3.5 billion house building programme in the last Parliament, working closely with the construction industry along the way. Okay, those are your panellists. Now, if you would kindly make your statements. First, Ms. Ford, please make your statement. Carol?
So, good evening. The CICV Forum is one example of the kind of collaborative effort that we don't want to lose post-pandemic. Adversity did bring people and organisations together, and we should build on that. Very specifically, the Lib Dems want the inclusion of expert organisations built into all policy development. The information and guidance that this forum has provided to its members will have been invaluable and in all probability much more relevant and readily understood than the raw information coming straight from government. This filter of expertise and collaboration is how we can arrive at policies which will work. The construction industry will be key to our recovery from the pandemic, not least because of the number of people employed in the sector and its contribution to GDP, but also because it will be a key contributor to our climate change targets. In broad terms, the Scottish Liberal Democrats support your manifesto asks, and the detail of these will be covered in the question and answer session. On the section on training, the very specific detail and the range of issues is impressive and would require much more time than a Hustings can deliver. But on the thrust of the argument that we need to increase and strengthen our training infrastructure, the Lib Dems wholeheartedly agree. The final section on conflict resolution is a perfect example of why every policy discussion should be dominated by experts, not token representation at the final stages. Only those at the sharp end of contractual obligations would identify this as an issue, one which will become more apparent as we exit the lockdown. Possibly the EU might be in touch with you for help with their discussions with AstraZeneca. So I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion.
Super, thank you very much, Ms. Ford. Ms. Lennon.
Thank you very much. I want to begin by paying tribute to the CICV Forum for your impact and your influence during the pandemic. And thank you for inviting me to be here tonight on behalf of Scottish Labour. As the convener of the cross-party group on construction in the Parliament over the past 5 years, I know there are so many familiar faces joining us tonight, and the CPG continue to meet virtually throughout the pandemic and despite lockdown. So I'm acutely aware of how tough the past 12 months have been for the sector and so many other sectors in Scotland. And Scottish Labour makes no apology for putting national recovery at the heart of this election. And as Scottish Labour spokesperson on the economy and fair work, I know just how important construction is to Scotland's recovery. Without bold action, Scotland faces an unemployment crisis, and that could quickly become a national emergency. So the scale of the challenge we face is huge, and that's why we need to focus on recovery and not return to old arguments and old divisions. Scottish Labour is proposing the most ambitious job creation plan in the history of devolution, including a jobs guarantee scheme that is worthy of the name. Some of our proposals include extending the UK-wide Kickstart scheme with a further 6-month subsidisation of wages, and we'll establish 5,000 new apprenticeships by providing subsidisation to employers for the first 12 months and create localised apprentice share schemes, initially with construction and agriculture. There's more to say tonight, but from a personal point of view, as a former town planner and as someone who worked in construction, you have my commitment that we'll continue to work in partnership with you to put national recovery and construction at the heart of that in the next parliamentary term. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lennon. That was lovely. Could we now speak to Ms. Moody?
Thanks very much, and thanks for inviting me. I'm currently involved in 2 community-led construction projects, the Mid-Steeple Quarter project in Dumfries, which is buying and redeveloping the high street and abandoned properties there, and the construction of a skate park in my nearest town. And it's been painfully clear from my experiences there just what an impact COVID-19 has had on the construction industry, and that coming out of lockdown has been far from simple for an industry that relies on really complex subcontracting networks and long lead times. In my own constituency, just one new build house has been constructed in the last year, and the second lockdown led to complete mothballing of a lot of projects and huge uncertainty for workers. The skate park I'm working on was supposed to be completed in June last year. It might be completed by June this year. And as well as that challenge and backlog, there's been significant delays in planning, in the availability of plant hire, and in the rise in the cost of key materials such as timber, the latter as much to do with Brexit as it has been to COVID. In this election, the Scottish Greens have set out really bold plans to secure a green recovery and put Scotland on the pathway to becoming a zero carbon economy. We recognise that delivering this really ambitious green recovery programme, doing it safely and securing the benefits for workers and businesses in Scotland requires really close collaboration with the construction industry, and we're really keen to do that from the outset. We've worked closely in terms of costing and developing our green infrastructure programme with people in industry and key sectors, and we're really keen to continue doing that. I think construction has a really bright future in Scotland, but there'll need to be a lot of support to make sure those benefits are felt throughout the country and not just by one or two large employers.
Thank you very much for that. Mr. Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be joining you this evening as the Conservative and Unionist on the panel. We have made it abundantly clear that your sector requires support to build back after this pandemic, and I pay tribute to what you have achieved to date in bringing together the individuals, the groups and the organisations that you have identified and working collaboratively to ensure that you can support one another and ensure that your futures are progressive. We in the Scottish Conservatives want to see the building and the construction sector supported. We've made ambitious proposals for building back. We've talked about apprenticeships. We've brought on board schemes to deal with social housing, to deal with how we can develop and see our communities regenerated and rejuvenated. And you play a vital role in ensuring that that happens, because you are at the grassroots of the industry. You understand the challenges that we face, but you also know the opportunities that are there. And it's these opportunities that by working collaboratively, we will succeed. Because as I say, we've come through this very difficult time and there is now light at the end of the tunnel due to the vaccines that we are now receiving, that life will start to get back to some kind of normality. But you are very well placed to achieve many of these goals because you have been working collaboratively. And as I say, we in the Scottish Conservatives support business, want to see economic growth at the heart of this election and also at the heart of what happens in the next Parliament. We do not want to see the Parliament being deflected on issues and constitution. We want to see it supporting business, ensuring that you get the investment and get the support mechanisms in place to ensure that you can, as an industry, progress and go forward. You've been very pioneering about what you've achieved to date, and you know the challenges on the climate change and the zero carbon and all of that, but you're prepared to come to the table and talk, and you're prepared to put your money where your mouth is. We, as a party, are prepared to listen and want to support you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. Now, last but by no means least, Mr. Kevin Stewart.
I did the old forgetting to unmute there for a second. I normally say to others to unmute. My fault tonight. Thank you very much for inviting me to attend these proceedings tonight. And I'd like to thank everyone in the CICV forum for your efforts during the course of the pandemic period. And in particular, I'd like to express my gratitude to your chair, Alan Wilson, for his input, advice and help at the Construction Leadership Forum, which I chair. I think it would be fair to say that Alan acted constructively throughout, was a critical friend, and he fought your corner with tenacity. And I'll probably have more to say about Alan later. I hope he's not blushing. This has been a tough year for all. No one ever expected what we have gone through. But by working together collaboratively, cooperatively, and communicating well, we have done each other a lot of service during the course of that past year. Drew mentioned the fact that I was responsible for the government's affordable housing programme during the course of this past Parliament, with £3.5 billion worth of investment, with the ambition to deliver 50,000 affordable homes, and we were on track to do so. But unfortunately, COVID took its grip. However, we will complete that programme safely, maybe a little bit behind time, and beyond that, in the next decade, we are committed to delivering 100,000 affordable homes, 70,000 of those for social rent. But that's not the only big programme that we have. We also have a major job of work to do in terms of decarbonising Scotland, and that includes decarbonising homes. And that's why a major part of our manifesto commitment is that pledge to invest £1.6 billion for decarbonisation over the course of the next Parliament. And we continue on in terms of improving standards in housing. And we are likely to have 2 housing bills in the next Parliament if we are re-elected. The first one looking at standards and rents in the private rented sector, and one which I think many have been waiting for a long time, around about how we tackle communal housing, how we deal with tenemental repairs. And I think that's something that John McKinney, who I think is on the call, has been particularly interested in for a very long time. Construction is without doubt key to our recovery. And we need to have a fair recovery for all. And I'm going to use that, what has now become an old chestnut, we need to build back better. And in order for us to get this absolutely right, we need your continued input and your continued cooperation. Thanks very much for inviting me again, and I look forward to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stewart. So it's now question time. And first up, the first question comes from Alan Wilson, who is the Managing Director of Select, and it's on the CICV forum. And the question is, how would your party envisage working with the CICV forum in the new Parliament? Ms. Ford, can you give me your answer, please?
Well, the Scottish Liberal Democrats are in favour of collaborative working as a general rule of thumb, that the more people involved in any discussion, the better the outcome is likely to be. And in fact, in our manifesto, we have included a pledge to actually incorporate a step in any policy making which involves bringing in the experts at an early stage of policy formulation, not once the thing is almost done and dusted. Because in politics, there's almost like a law of unintended consequences in that headlines are good, people have the best of intentions, and then further down the line, we find that actually it doesn't pan out quite as we expected. And generally speaking, that's because the people who really understand the practicalities on the ground haven't been involved at an early enough stage. And while headlines and principles are great, sometimes it's just down to the nitty-gritty of the management and the structure of what's being proposed as to whether or not something's actually a success. So we would certainly be involving organisations like the CICV Forum in any discussions on construction. And I think as an example of what I'm saying, if you look at, when I looked at the documentation that you have on your website for members, the level of detail in that is only possible because of your collective expertise. And it's working together that you have generated documentation that is much better than if just one organisation had done it on their own. And that's an example of what we mean. So we must bring in people at the very early stages to formulate policies and most definitely formulate the actual actions that will be taken to carry these policies.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Ford. Can I just remind all you panelists that you've only got a minute here.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Ms. Lennon.
Thank you, Chair. Well, my commitment is that in the first week of the new Parliament, I would offer and hope to meet with the forum, because you'll see from Scottish Labour's National Recovery Plan, our themes in that recovery plan are on jobs and economy, the NHS, education, communities and climate. And you and all of your members are absolutely crucial to that recovery. You've seen how I operate on a cross-party basis on the CPG, and I would want to continue to work in that collaborative way, and that's the approach that Scottish Labour wants to take. I've also been acutely aware during the election campaign, there's a lot of feedback that perhaps Scottish Government hasn't always been business friendly, or listening to you up front. A lot of stuff's been done in a reactive way, so we need to overcome that, and the way we do that is through collaboration, through early communication. So you have my commitment to meet with you at your earliest convenience.
Excellent. You just hit it on a minute there, Ms. Lennon. That was great. Now, can I ask Ms. Moody?
Absolutely. So the construction industry has a really critical role to play in our proposed green infrastructure programme, building and retrofitting green homes, supporting the continued growth of the renewable energy sector, and building the modern zero carbon public transport system we need. Our Rail for All plans to renew and extend Scotland's railway would create 16,800 construction jobs alone. And that plan was itself drawn up by transport industry experts who really know their stuff. So we're really delighted that the CICV Forum has been formed to facilitate that collaborative approach. And we look forward to working with you in developing and delivering our green economic recovery plans.
It's Mr. Alexander Stewart.
I pay tribute to what you've done already, but it's so important that you are at the table, because you have the expertise. As I said in my opening statement, you work on the ground, you understand the industry, you have to manage the situation, deal with the crises. You've come up with medium and short-term and long-term plans. We as a parliament and the government, whoever that government is, needs to take on board what you're actually proposing and work together to ensure that you have the opportunity to bring these plans and to discuss these plans. Many of the proposals you put in your manifesto, your document, talking about a dedicated minister, talking about advisors, all of these are very, very good and show that you really want to see a change in the way that your industry is dealt with, and that we should do and try and support you to achieve that.
Mr. Kevin Stewart.
Thank you very much. I think it would be fair to say that the CICV Forum has very much been at the table of late, and long may that continue. And I think it would be fair to say that Alan played a major part in the formulation of the construction sector guidance and has had a role to play in all of the discussions that there have been around the recovery plan, which will be so vital as we move forward. The CICV Forum have also been at the forefront of promoting working safely. And I'd like to pay tribute to you for the character Campbell, who has helped to promote that message through your very clever use of social media. And I'm sure that we'll see more of Campbell as we move forward. As I said earlier, cooperation, collaboration, and communication have been absolutely key to getting things right. And that must continue as we move forward. And I have absolutely no hesitation in saying that if re-elected, the SNP government will continue to work with the construction industry as a whole and certainly with the CICV forum, so that we can do our level best to aid recovery together.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. That's excellent. Now we move on to our next question, which is from Fiona Hodgson, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Scottish and Northern Ireland Plumbing Employers Federation, better known perhaps as SNPEF. And Fiona's question is on regulation. And the question is, we believe that regulation would transform the industry by raising standards and professionalism. What is your party's view on this? Ms. Ford.
Well, to be honest, this question is something that's quite dear to my heart, because I've been involved in professional regulation for teachers, for solicitors, where I was on the regulatory committee for 7 years, and now for chartered accountants. There are many purposes to professional regulation, and its primary purpose is to protect the public. And I think that's particularly critical in the construction industry. It's also to maintain high standards. And it's finally, I think, to actually protect the qualifications and the standing of the professionals themselves. The cowboys, if you like, which is what people tend to call such people in the construction industry, are doing no favours to the people who are properly qualified, properly trained. So the Scottish Liberal Democrats are totally committed to all measures which would support consumers, protect standards and professional qualifications. And that applies to training providers and qualifications. They must also be subject to scrutiny to maintain public confidence in the construction industry. So we are totally in support of having a very well-regulated, well-respected construction industry that has the full confidence of the public.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. Ms. Lennon.
Thank you. It's a really important question from Fiona, and like Carol, Scottish Labour fully supportive. What was frustrating in the last parliamentary session is when there was a debate about the title of protection for electricians back in October 2018. We couldn't get commitment from Scottish Government immediately, and I know that Alexander Stewart's colleague Jamie Halpro-Johnson has proposed a members' bill, and we would support that. I think it is important that qualified tradespeople are recognised for their experience, for their competence, and the public equally then have confidence in who's coming into their homes or their workplace. So it just makes absolute sense, and this is about not making it more difficult for people to do their job, but to give people confidence to work safely and to have pride in the trade that they do. So we would fully support measures to improve regulation, improve public safety.
Ms. Moody.
Thanks. Yeah, likewise, we're committed to ensuring people are safe in all circumstances, and we really agree that steps have to be taken to make sure that construction work's conducted in a safe manner. So we'd like to see some form of assurance system in place so that people know that the individual completing construction work is at least of a minimum level of competency. I think any regulation always has to be created in collaboration with industry, with stakeholders, self-employed as well, to make sure it's fit for purpose, provides the assurance of safety and quality for consumers, but isn't overly burdensome. Given the anticipated growth in renewable energy and energy efficiency markets, we've committed to protect consumers and support high standards by creating a Scottish quality mark in partnership with the energy efficiency and domestic renewables sector. And we require projects that benefit from public funding to comply with the PAS 2035 standards.
Mr. Alexander Stewart.
Thank you. Professional standards and regulations are vitally important in your industry, and many of you already have and work through standards and have gold standards and various schemes that you adopt within your specific industries or within your specific support mechanisms that you have there to ensure that the construction businesses that you work with are there. But it's vitally important, as others have said, that we adapt and we support you through the parliamentary process to ensure that we bring in some legislation that helps provide you with that. And we as a party, the Scottish Conservatives, are very much in favour of doing that. We want to work hand in hand with you. We want to support you as an industry and support your businesses to ensure that they can develop and expand their potential, because everybody wants to work in a safe environment and everybody wants to have a tradesperson who is of quality. And as I say, many of you already are there. So we as politicians need to learn from what standards you've put in place so that it can be transformed, and it will be transformable if we adapt and we support the industry. Because as I said before, you bring the expertise, you bring the knowledge, and you bring the understanding, but we have to make sure that the legislation fits in to what you're trying to achieve, and that would be our goal.
Mr. Kevin Stewart.
Thank you very much, Drew. I think it should be the aim of all of us to drive up standards and safety, and in order to instill trust in the people that you folks are serving on a day-to-day basis. As many of you will know, the UK government started a consultation on the recognition of professional qualifications and the regulation of professional standards in August of last year. And it would be fair to say, I think, that we have a hodgepodge of different requirements for different professions, some of which are licensed, some certified, some accredited, and some which are chartered professional bodies that have voluntary accreditation schemes. And I think it would be very difficult for most members of the public to get their heads around the fact that a security guard is in a regulated profession, but a plumber is not. And some of those professional regulations, those duties, some of them are devolved and some of them are still reserved to the UK government. And in my opinion, all of these duties should be in the hands of the Scottish Parliament. But I'm sure that that comes as no surprise to any of you out there that I would say that. But as we move forward, we have to have a real debate around about these regulatory issues. And we have to come to a consensus around about how we move forward in regulation. I think that the horrific circumstances emanating from the Grenfell inquiry quite clearly show that some occupations that should be regulated have not been in the past, and now we need to do that in order to keep people safe and in order for you to have confidence.
Thank you. We now move to the third question, which is from Hugh Edgar. Hugh is the Associate Director Policy at the Chartered Institute of Building, and the question's on skills and training. And Hugh asks, what would your party do to ensure the continuation of funding support for employers, both for apprenticeships and upskilling of the current workforce? Ms. Ford.
Well, education and training are a major focus of the Scottish Liberal Democrat Recovery Programme. And actually, just recently, I thought it was quite galling when I read that Ferguson Marine say they can't find 120 staff to create a third shift in building those two ferries for us, particularly for those of us who come from a shipbuilding, a family of people who worked on the Govan shipyards. So that's quite disappointing that they can't actually find the workers, the skilled workers for that task. So what we're proposing is that, first of all, we need to target the Northeast particularly, because as the gas and oil winds down, we would target £50 million to retrain and upskill the staff coming out of that industry. And we will create something called a Scottish Training Bond of £5,000 to allow adults to retrain coming from any industry into an area where work is available. We want to guarantee job or training to every single 16 to 24-year-old, and that would include access to apprenticeships and to create 2,000 paid internships for graduates going into small or medium-sized companies who would benefit from the graduate skills coming in, and the graduate would benefit from getting a start in a career. The many sort of detailed proposals that you have in your own, the CICV manifesto, that provides exactly the kind of information that government should be using to inform the very specific detail of policy. But these are the broad areas that we would be promoting to get more skilled people into the workforce.
Ms. Lennon.
Thank you. I know we only have 60 seconds, so I would probably recommend that you have a look at Scottish Labour's National Recovery Plan. You will see jobs is at the very top of that and at the very heart of our manifesto and our vision for the next 5 years, because there is a temptation on the part of some parties to indulge in constitutional debate and division, but people want to know in practical terms what the roadmap to recovery will look like, what support will be there for business and for individuals. So there's lots of references to skills in terms of upskilling, reskilling, how we can support local government to take on apprentices, how we can use our talented workforce and people in Scotland to retrofit homes, to tackle fuel poverty, and to create new jobs in construction and in manufacturing. So I would urge you to look at that recovery document and be part of that, because as Anna Sauer has said, we don't have all the answers and a manifesto isn't the final word. So we will want to work with you in the weeks ahead.
Ms. Moody.
Thanks. So the transition to a zero carbon economy that we're calling for is obviously a major opportunity for the construction sector, but it's also going to be a really big challenge. We're talking, 75,000 new jobs, and we're acutely aware of the need for growth and upskilling of the workforce. We want to provide multi-year funding for skills development, training and apprenticeships, specifically in the housing and energy efficiency sectors. And we'll establish a centre of excellence to deliver a technical skills programme for green manufacturing. And that will provide grant funding for manufacturing firms to retrain and upskill their workforce, as well as providing apprenticeships. We continue to support the Apprentice Employer Grant, and we'd support increasing this significantly over the next Parliament. One thing we're also calling for is funding parity with higher education for the further education sector, because we know the new workforce needs to be trained often locally and to a really high level. And the further education sector is really well placed to deliver that. So we'd like to see them funded properly.
Mr. Alexander Stewart.
Economic growth is the cornerstone for this recovery, and your sector plays a vital role in that. So skills, training, apprenticeships are vitally important. And we fundamentally believe that there should be more funding put into it. We have put some very strong proposals forward in our manifesto to support apprenticeships, to ensure that the graduate apprenticeship is secured and the levy apprenticeships are fully funded and move forward. We also want to ensure that we develop and we bring people back into the industry, or we bring new people into the industry. And that includes ensuring that women have the opportunity to become much more involved in your sector. And I think that's an important way to take things forward. But we also want to talk about what's happening across some of your regions. We've talked about the Northeast region that at the moment is requiring much of support as it transitions, and it will continue to transition. But there's also the opportunities that take place between rural and the urban side of things. Many of you who are in the construction industry in the rural environment find it much more challenging. So you should be given support, you should be given assistance because of that rurality to try and compete and ensure that you can have the opportunities that are maybe given to the central belt much more. So we understand and identify that it's not one fate type and one that will fit all and one size that will fit all. It needs to be looked at, it needs to be managed, and you need to be supported. But be under no doubt that we want economic growth, and that can only come through investment and support within your organisation, and that comes through training and support mechanisms of that kind. Thank you.
Mr. Kevin Stewart.
Thank you very much, Drew, and I'm glad to hear others talking about the northeast of Scotland I'll try not now to move on to parochiality and stick to the question as a whole. I think that everyone agrees without doubt that creating jobs and boosting skills is absolutely central to our COVID recovery. And if re-elected, an SNP government will work with employers to build the skills and infrastructure that we need to succeed in our future, including investing in the Energy Transition Fund here in the northeast of Scotland, which is worth £62 billion. And our manifesto lays out our plans for a youth guarantee scheme to ensure that every young person aged between 16 and 24 has the opportunity, based on their personal circumstances, to go to university, college, or get an apprenticeship or training, or to go on a work experience programme. We'll invest £500 million over the next Parliament to support new jobs and to reskill people for the jobs of the future. And our National Transition Training Fund will support workers whose jobs are at risk with retraining opportunities. And we'll also establish a new Green Jobs Workforce Academy to help support people into work, particularly in the low carbon economy. And as most of you know, we were on track to meet our target of 30,000 modern apprenticeship starts by 2020. However, again, that was hit by COVID. But as part of the recovery, we'll build that back up to 30,000 and assess demand to see how much further we can go on that front. Beyond that, we need to take cognizance of some of the work that we have already done, including looking at skills, the skills plan that was put forward by Professor Stephen Smith of Heriot-Watt University, which quite clearly stated that we needed to attract new folk to the construction industry, including women, as Alexander has stated. Although I have to say, in many of my trips before COVID, we were beginning to see many more women on construction sites, which is only a good thing.
Mr. Stewart, can I ask you to stick with the timing, please? We're on
I'll just ask folk to go and have a further look at our manifesto for even more.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question is on procurement, and it's from John McKinney. John is the Scotland manager of the National Federation of Roofing Contractors, and John asks, there are numerous economic and environmental benefits to be gained from working with small local businesses. What would your party do to help local SMEs take full advantage of the opportunities that can be created by optimum public sector construction procurement? Ms. Ford.
Well, actually, public sector procurement hits a nerve with me. I was still a head teacher when local authorities brought in new procurement regulations, and the strong links that schools had with local businesses was broken completely. Local suppliers were frozen out of the system, and quality suffered because the only criterion was cost, not quality, and not the impact on the local communities. So I'm just going to read out two sections from the Lib Dem manifesto. One section says, we will overhaul public sector procurement policies to ensure they support local suppliers, micro bidders, fair employment practices, and take note of the level of state aid in non-Scottish bids. And the second point I would read out would be, we will encourage enterprise bodies to value and support more small and micro businesses, taking account of local community impacts, supporting them beyond the startup phase to include expansion, collaboration and diversification. So this whole area is already in our manifesto, and we are totally committed to making it much more possible for small businesses to take part in public sector bidding and to be involved in public sector procurement, and for local communities for that to be one of the criteria under consideration, not just the cost factor.
Very much. Ms. Lennon.
Thank you. It's a really important question. It came up in another recent hustings I took part in, and I put my email address in the chat, and I've had a lot of emails since. I might not do that tonight. Only joking. Open to all emails, but it clearly is a bugbear. It needs to be resolved again in partnership, and you need the Scottish Government, ministers and civil servants to be working with you, not against you. It can feel like that sometimes. There's huge opportunities around local engagement on low carbon and innovation. And in our manifesto, you'll see that we've recognised that SMEs are the lifeblood of our economy, and that we will reorientate procurement so that it works for businesses in Scotland. There's a lot we can do nationally, but we need to help at a local level. And I still feel there's been big national projects like City Deal, and you as small traders don't always feel that you benefit from that.
Thanks. We believe public procurement could be a real engine for growth for small local businesses that are socially and environmentally responsible, and we're committed to reforming the procurement requirements so that they can fulfil that. We want to ensure that Scottish businesses capture more of the supply chain opportunities that arise, especially from the growing renewable industry sector, and introduce minimum domestic sourcing requirements as part of sectoral deals and for any form of public sector support. As someone who's made use of the Public Contract Scotland portal, I believe there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of the accessibility and use of online procurement tools. And we'd also like to see business and enterprise support targeted at small and medium-sized companies so they can compete on a level playing field with larger organisations in terms of bidding for tenders. We know that large operators have entire teams dedicated just to the tendering element of securing construction work, and it leaves smaller companies at a real competitive disadvantage when bidding for work. So that needs to be resolved.
Thank you. Mr. Alexander Stewart.
SMEs are without question the lifeblood of the local economy, and we should do all within our power to ensure that you get the opportunities to participate in procurement. For far too long, you have been excluded because of the rules and regulations that have been participated. And we need to ensure that you can capture that market, that you can be at the table, that you have the opportunity to sell your products and your services to ensure that they do get that. We have in our manifesto talked about ensuring that Scotland First procurement strategy is talked about. We've also looked at the best value aspect. It has already been discussed now about low cost not being that it's value that needs to be looked at, not the cost element of it. And there are many facilities across the community that you have the opportunity to participate in if we get this right, and if we open the opportunity for you to develop your business and your potential. And we believe that is there. So we need to work together to ensure that we give you these opportunities and that we don't once again become government and legislation that becomes a burden to SMEs expanding and fulfilling their own potential. So we very much are, as I say, a party of business. We want to ensure that you have the opportunities to thrive and survive after this pandemic. And we will make sure that we will have you at the table to discuss your options and where we can take them.
Well, thank you very much. Just a reminder to all the panelists, time is running against us, so we want to try and get in as many questions as we can. So if I can ask you now, Mr. Kevin Stewart, to be brief in your answer.
Thank you very much. Well, I believe in keeping wealth and local communities where we can, and that means buying locally where that is possible. And it always strikes me as a little bit bizarre when folk talk about cost only when it comes to procurement, because as a former local councillor, I actually had the procurement portal on my desk so that we could look and see on a regular basis who was gaining which contracts. And Alexander's right, it is about base value, it's not about cost. And I think there's sometimes risk aversity that we need to get out of some folk when they are procuring. I think that there's no doubt in my mind that the construction accord, which is being worked on at this moment in time, can lead to better cooperation, collaboration and communication between public bodies and the construction industry as a whole. And I hope that folk will engage in the work that's going on there at this moment so that we can get that absolutely right as we move forward. But I want to give you just one wee example of where...
Briefly, if you would.
Where you can get it right. When I first became minister, I was told that Orkney had not spent any of its HEAPS ABS money, its energy efficiency area-based schemes money. And that's because there was no one on the islands to actually carry out the work. Now, with a little bit of time, a little bit of communication and a wee bit of help, they managed to find folk to do that work on the islands. That's what we should be striving to do as we move on, which involves small and medium-sized companies.
Excellent. Now, this may be the last question we have the opportunity to ask, so but we'll try and get more in if it's at all possible. It's from Gordon Nelson, who's the Scotland Director of the Federation of Master Builders, and he has a question on VAT, and he asks, the burden of VAT set at 20% is a significant disincentive for homeowners to commission good quality home repairs, renovations and energy efficient projects. VAT is a reserved matter for the UK government. So would you establish a VAT reimbursement fund in Scotland for home repair, maintenance and energy efficiency improvement measures? Ms. Ford.
Well, actually, the Liberal Democrats already have a record at UK level of pushing for reduced VAT on renovating and insulating homes. So we were on board on this policy to boost the construction industry and to assist with the climate change targets. And we've also had a help to renovate loan scheme it was in our 2016 manifesto, and it's in our manifesto this time as well. So we've been committed to this idea for a long time. So I'm going to break the habit of a politician's lifetime and do this very quickly, because I don't have anything more to add other than that we fully support CICV's manifesto request in relation to VAT for the reasons that you've listed and for the predicted outcomes from that. I could talk for longer, but we just agree with what you're asking for.
That's good of you. Thank you. Ms. Lennon.
I'll try and be quick. Also, and stick with that consensus, I think it's a really important question from Gordon, one that I'm familiar with. And thank you to Gordon for all his work as the Secretariat of the CPG on construction. I think it would really unlock some opportunities in the domestic market. And if it required some investment from Scottish Government, that would be very worthwhile. Scottish Labour wants to work closely with the public sector and our local authorities on this. So we support the ask for the reimbursement fund, and of course we'll work with Scottish Labour or UK Labour colleagues at Westminster too to see what more could be done, but it's a really important issue. Thank you, Gordon, for raising it again.
Ms. Moody.
Thanks. Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of consensus on this. We agree the current VAT system is regressive and it's holding back demand for vital energy efficiency improvements and retrofits. So we support abolishing VAT on repairs, improvements and retrofit work. If it was a devolved matter, we'd aim to phase out VAT entirely and replace it with an environmental tax. But as it's currently reserved, we're committed to ensuring the process of making homes energy efficient is as accessible as possible within existing powers. I'm currently working on a mixed use development, so it's going to be a mixture of housing, new build housing, redevelopment housing and retail creative space. And it's an absolute nightmare in terms of VAT. We've got 3 different VAT rates to juggle, and that's just on one property. And we're in the process of developing a further 4 and possibly more beyond that. So it really needs fixing. So yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of consensus on that one.
Admirably brief, so thank you for that. Mr. Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Gordon, it's a very, very sensible suggestion. You talk about a burden of VAT, and that is exactly what it is. It is a burden on the businesses that you have and expanding and developing. So yes, I have certainly made representations through my last 5 years to the Chancellor and others about where we can try to support. And VAT is one area we have identified that there is potential room for some flexibility. especially in your own sector when it comes to adaptations in energy efficiency and developing. So I think that it is a very sensible idea to create some kind of fund and to look at the potential of reducing the value-added tax that you're having to deal with. And then from all of that, it's about trying to then engage and ensure that you have the opportunity to build back and to transform and to do all of that. And as I say, in our manifesto, we put forward £2.5 billion of costs that we would want to put into the industry to do that. But as I say, I'm very supportive of your idea of trying to rid the burden that you face when it comes to VAT.
Excellent, thank you. I think if we keep this brief, we might get a chance to get one more question in. Mr. Kevin Stewart.
Thank you very much, and plaudits to the FMB for their continued campaign around about VAT. And as Gordon well knows, I've been on to the UK government on numerous occasions in terms of communication and discussion, trying to get them to see sense and to either reduce or abolish VAT for refurbishment, repair, and of course regeneration projects. Is the right thing to do. It would certainly be the right thing to do at this moment in time in terms of aiding recovery, but unfortunately they continue to say no. I wish we had the VAT powers here because I think we would do something much differently. In terms of the proposal around about SNIB, that's something that I would need to have some more detail on in terms of the proposal, but as always, happy to have that discussion and consider as we move forward.
Thank you very much for that. I think we have one more question that would be very quick answers, I think, before we wind up here. It's from Mr. Colin McCorkadale, Director of Archibald McCorkadale and Sons. And his question is, it is estimated that £3.8 billion is spent annually on the repair and maintenance of existing homes. However, the Scottish Housing Conditions Survey shows that 52% of homes are not wind and watertight. My question is, do you agree? And if so, how would you propose to address this issue? As quickly as we can, please, Ms. Ford.
Well, just quickly, I live in Glasgow, which of course has many tenemented properties. And one of the big issues is the whole factoring problem of owners who refuse to contribute if work is needing done. That needs to be looked at. The solution that they use in Edinburgh has its own problems, but we do need a review of owners' responsibilities in properties, multi-owned properties. And the
Excellent. Thank you very much. Can I move on now to Ms. Lennon?
Absolutely agree. This is fundamental to human rights in terms of health, well-being. And when you think about the fact that we have 1 in 4 children in Scotland who are living in poverty, we have a poverty-related attainment gap. We need people to be living in homes that are warm and safe. At a very local level, again, going back to local authorities, there should be a quality sign-off process through building control. But I think generally, and it's a point that Kevin might not like to hear, but as Minister for Local Government, we cannot keep cutting local governments because that is harming our communities, it's harming this sector. That has to change in the next Parliament.
Great, thanks. I know for reasons of time, we are asking Mr. Alexander Stewart, because I know he's got another appointment to rush off to. So if you could kindly keep it brief, Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, homes need to be fit for purpose, and you've identified that there are many who are falling below the standard. That needs to be taken for investment. We need to be investing in this sector. We need to be putting money into it, not cutting, as Monica has indicated. Local government has seen a decimation over the last 14 years. We need to change that policy by putting money into it to ensure that we can have homes that are fit for people to live in.
Very much. Ms. Moody.
Thanks. I've posted a full answer in the chat, but in brief, I'm a big campaigner on fuel poverty, and it's a huge issue in rural communities where people are generally off grid, so fuel costs are high, incomes are low, and their houses tend to be older and not very well insulated. So I think it should be a real priority. Over the last Parliament, the Greens have secured extra funding for social housing providers to improve energy efficiency, but it's been clear from the number that have missed the energy efficiency standards and social housing milestone at the end of last year, that's not necessarily being directed at the properties most in need. I think there's been an element of doing the low-hanging fruit. So we'd like to see that directed at the most challenging properties. Might use off-site manufacturing, taking a whole street approach, so it's less disruptive and more cost effective, and really dealing with the most difficult properties first rather than leaving them till last.
Very much. Finally, Mr. Kevin Stewart.
Thank you very much. And it's in the interest of all property owners to make sure that their buildings are wind and watertight. And I think we need to educate folk a little bit more about that. I had a wee spat with somebody I know very well just not so long ago, whose preference was to spend money on a new kitchen rather than to spend money on some loose slates on the roof. We've got to change that thinking. Beyond that, I think that we already do a lot of good work in this regard, but we need to build on it. The Heaps Abs programme, as Laura has mentioned, often goes for the low-hanging fruit. But what we need to do is to be ambitious in terms of looking at some of the more problem areas, including like here in Aberdeen, where the Aberdeen Victorian tenement scheme actually helped a lot of owners and, more importantly, got them to recognise where work was needed to be done. So we need to build on that as we move forward. At the end of the day, we're going to have to intervene in folks' homes more than we ever have done before in order to meet our carbon reduction targets and to get this right for the future.
Super, thank you very much for that. And thank you to all our panelists for addressing the questions. It's been very enlightening. Thank you. Thank you also to our questioners and to our audience. This Forum Hustings event has been recorded and will be available shortly to watch on our YouTube channel. Thank you all once again, and good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.